I am Emma Cole, 27 years old, and the night I met death started like every other closing shift at the Oakline Diner on the far edge of Chicago. The neon sign outside kept flickering like it was struggling to stay alive, and the rain hit the windows so hard it felt like a warning no one wanted to hear. The place smelled like burnt coffee, old grease, and the kind of tired air that comes from too many years of disappointment. I wiped down the counter and tried to ignore how empty the room felt, except for the hum of the fridge and the buzzing light above the register. My feet hurt, my hands smelled like dish soap, and all I could think about was my daughter Mia, sleeping alone in our small apartment with the cheap lock that never closed right. I kept telling myself it was just one more hour before I could go home and pretend everything was fine. The door swung open so fast the bell barely made a sound, and a man stumbled inside wearing an expensive suit that should have belonged to someone with power. His shirt was soaked with blood and his breath came in short, tight bursts, and for a moment my mind refused to believe he was real. I froze with the rag still in my hand while he gripped the nearest booth like he was fighting gravity. My heartbeat kicked hard when I heard a gunshot outside, sharp enough to cut through the rain. Fear crawled up my spine and every instinct told me to run to the back room and hide until the danger passed. Instead, I rushed toward him, even though my legs shook because someone was dying in front of me, and I could not let that happen while Mia slept miles away, unaware her mother was making a choice she might never come back from. I pressed my hands against his wound and felt warm blood gather between my fingers as the world outside grew louder. I did not know his name or what brought him here, only that helping him would pull me into something I could never undo. The moment he whispered that they were coming for him, I knew my life would never return to the quiet struggle I thought I understood. Before that night, my life moved in quiet circles that felt small, even when I tried to tell myself it was enough. Our apartment sat on the third floor of an old building that always smelled like damp carpet, and the walls were thin enough for me to hear the arguments of neighbors I had never met. I kept everything clean because it made the space feel bigger, but the rooms were cramped, and the air always carried a hint of old paint and worn-out dreams. Mia slept on the pull-out bed pushed against the wall, curled up with the stuffed rabbit she carried everywhere, and never let go unless she was eating. I watched her chest rise and fall, and felt that familiar mix of love and guilt settle over me, because I wished she had more than this small place and a mother who was always tired. Sometimes I sat on the edge of the bed a little longer than I should, because listening to her steady breathing made me feel like the world outside could not reach us for a moment. Getting ready for the night shift was its own quiet ritual. I tied my hair back, checked my bag twice, and left a note for Mia's sitter even though she barely read them anymore. Money was always tight, and the stack of overdue bills on the counter felt heavier each day, especially after her father left without a word when she was only a few months old. I learned to carry the loneliness the way other people carried their phones. It stayed close, always there, reminding me of how many hours I worked and how little I had to show for it. Some nights I wondered if anyone saw me at all, or if I had faded into the background like another tired woman trying to keep her head above water. The diner was a world of its own. Truckers stopped for coffee that tasted like burnt dirt, and tired cops came in for late meals and quick chatter that floated through the room without ever landing. Regulars knew my name but kept their distance because I had mastered the skill of being polite without inviting anyone into my life. There were moments when the television above the counter played the evening news while I cleaned tables. I once heard a story about a businessman named Lucas Moretti who was praised for his charity work and cool confidence, and something in the anchor's voice made me look up even though I never cared about people like him. I did not know then that his name would pull me into a world that felt nothing like my quiet life. When I locked the apartment door before heading to work that night, I had no idea how close I was to losing the little stability I had spent years fighting for. I only knew I had to keep going because Mia depended on me, and that truth was the only thing strong enough to keep me moving through each long and lonely shift. The man fell into the corner booth like his body had finally given up, and the sound of him hitting the seat echoed through the empty diner. Blood soaked through the fabric and spread across the cracked vinyl in a slow, dark bloom that felt unreal even as I stared straight at it. His breathing came in sharp, uneven bursts that made every instinct in me want to turn and run as far as I could. Glass shattered when another gunshot hit the front window, and the force sent a spray of shards across the counter and floor. My legs moved before my mind caught up, and I ducked behind the booth with my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the rain outside. I thought of Mia alone in our small apartment and felt a flash of panic so intense it stole the air from my chest because I knew she needed me alive more than anything. For 1 second I almost bolted toward the back door, ready to let this man die so I could stay safe for her. But when I looked at him slumped against the seat with blood sliding from his shirt in a steady stream, something in me refused to walk away. I crawled toward him even though my hands shook so badly I could barely keep pressure on the wound. His skin felt cold as I pressed my palms against his side and tried to slow the bleeding. He drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling words I could not understand as his eyelids fluttered like he was fighting to stay awake. I kept whispering that he needed to hold on even though my voice cracked and my thoughts scattered into fear and adrenaline. His wallet fell from his pocket when he shifted, and I grabbed it without thinking because I wanted to know who he was. A photo slipped out and landed near my knee, showing a little girl with dark hair and a smile so bright it punched the breath from me. Seeing her felt like someone pulled a thread between us because I knew what it meant to fight for a child and what it meant to risk everything for them without hesitation. Before I could process anything, headlights washed through the broken window, and a black SUV rolled to a stop outside with a quiet authority that made the back of my neck prickle. 4 men stepped out wearing dark clothes and carrying themselves like they were used to violence, and they moved with a speed that told me this was not the first time they had handled a situation like this. They pushed through the door before the bell could sound and went straight to him as if they knew exactly where he was. One of them called him Mr. Moretti, while the others secured the room with calm precision that felt practiced. They did not thank me or ask if I was hurt. They just demanded my name, my address, and every piece of information they wanted while their cold eyes told me there was no point refusing. The man I had tried to save was lifted out of the booth with a level of care that said he mattered to people with power. I stood there frozen with blood drying on my hands and the photo of his child burning a hole in my thoughts. When the SUV pulled away and left me standing alone in the ruined diner, I understood that I had crossed into something bigger than my small life, and that what I had done would not be forgotten by the men who lived in his world. The night after the shooting felt unreal, and I kept replaying every second until it twisted my stomach so tight I could barely breathe. I stood in the bathroom with the shower running too hot, and scrubbed at the dried blood on my shoes until my hands went numb because leaving it there made the danger feel closer. Sleep came in short flickers that broke apart the moment I closed my eyes, and each time I woke I felt that same cold fear settle back into my chest. By morning I moved through the apartment quietly, while Mia played with her breakfast without noticing how distracted I was. My body felt heavy, but my mind kept racing through possibilities I did not want to name, and I found myself checking the hallway window more than once before stepping outside. When I walked to the bus stop, I caught sight of a dark car parked across the street with tinted windows that hid whoever sat inside, and I could not shake the feeling that it was there for me. Dropping Mia at my mother's house brought its own kind of ache, because pretending everything was normal felt impossible. I kissed her forehead and held her tight for a moment longer than usual, trying to hide the panic pressing at my ribs. My mother sensed something was wrong, but I told her I was only tired because saying anything else would break whatever fragile safety we still had. The diner felt different that evening, quieter and colder, as if the room still remembered the violence. When I tied my apron and stepped behind the counter, I noticed an envelope sitting near the register with my name written in neat handwriting. Inside was a stack of cash far larger than any tip I had ever received, and a small note that thanked me for saving him without offering a name or a promise that the danger was gone. The rest of the shift crawled by, and every time the bell over the door rang, I felt my shoulders tense. The same dark car from earlier lingered at the edge of the lot, positioned just far enough to pretend it was nothing but close enough for me to know better. By the time I headed home, my nerves were stretched thin, and the air felt tight around me with each step. When I reached my building, a black sedan sat under the streetlight like it had been waiting for hours. 2 well-dressed men stepped out with calm movements that carried the same controlled power I had seen at the diner, and hearing my name leave their mouths made the world tilt for a moment. They requested that I come with them to meet Lucas Moretti, and the weight of their steady eyes told me refusing was not an option if I wanted Mia safe. Fear pushed against my ribs as I looked back toward the dark windows of my building and wondered if this was the moment my life split in two. I got into the car because the alternative felt even more dangerous, and the door closed with a soft finality that echoed in my chest. As the sedan pulled away and my neighborhood faded behind the tinted glass, I realized I had stepped into a world that would not let me walk back out untouched. The car carried me through winding roads lined with tall iron gates until the mansion appeared behind a row of cypress trees, and the sight of it made my breath catch because nothing about it felt welcoming. The stone walls rose high like they were built to keep the world out, and the windows glowed with a dim light that looked more like warning than warmth. I followed the men inside and felt the weight of silence press against my skin as if the house itself was holding its breath. The entryway opened into long halls filled with dark wood and portraits of people whose eyes seemed to follow me. My footsteps echoed as we walked deeper into the estate, and each room we passed looked expensive in a way that felt cold rather than impressive. I kept my hands close to my sides because every part of me felt out of place in that world of heavy furniture and muted shadows. They led me into a library that smelled like old paper and clean smoke, and Lucas Moretti stood near a large window with his posture steady and controlled. He turned when I entered, and his eyes felt too calm for someone who had nearly died the night before. But I saw the bandage under the open part of his shirt and the faint tension around his jaw. He studied me with a look that felt like he already knew the pieces of my life I tried to hide, and the quiet between us stretched until it scraped at my nerves. He tried to thank me for saving him, but the words came out stiff, as if gratitude was a language he rarely spoke. When he pushed an envelope across the table, I stepped back because I knew I could not take money for doing what any human being would have done. The rejection surprised him for a moment and softened something in his face that I did not expect to see in a man whose world was built on control. Before either of us spoke again, I heard soft footsteps in the hallway. A small girl appeared by the door, watching me with wide, curious eyes before lowering her gaze as if she regretted being seen. She looked no older than 8, with dark hair tucked behind her ears and a quiet sadness in her posture that made my heart tighten. Lucas shifted in a way that was almost gentle, and the change in him was so sudden it startled me. His voice lowered when he spoke to her, and I could see how carefully he tried to reach her, even though she barely responded. I understood then that this was Sophia, the daughter mentioned in the news report, a child who had seen things no one her age should carry. She stayed close to the doorway, half hidden from the room, and something about her shyness pulled me toward her even while my fear of her father kept me still. Lucas watched us both before telling me he wanted to offer something different than money. He explained that Sophia spoke to almost no one, and that she needed someone patient, someone gentle, someone who would not flinch at the shadows in her eyes, and he believed I could help her. He added that Mia would be welcome if it made things easier, and hearing my daughter's name in his voice made my pulse jump. I stood there caught between confusion and fear, because I felt the pull of the child and the danger of the man at the same time. The offer felt strange and unreal, like a door opening into a room I had not asked to enter, but turning away felt just as impossible. As I looked at Sophia and then back at the man waiting for my answer, I realized this was not just a job, but an invitation into a world I did not understand, and stepping into it would change everything. The next afternoon I accepted the offer because something in Sophia's eyes stayed with me long after I left the mansion. Bringing Mia to the estate felt strange and surreal, but she held my hand with the kind of trust only a child can give, and that steadied me. The guards waved us through the gate with a quiet familiarity that still made my shoulders tense. Yet the house looked softer than it had the first time I saw it. Inside, Sophia waited near the staircase with her small frame half hidden by the railing, watching us with careful eyes that darted away whenever Mia came too close. Her body stayed tight as if she expected something loud or sudden, and every movement she made felt measured and slow. Mia approached with her usual brightness, holding out a small stuffed bear as a peace offering, but Sophia stepped back as if the gesture was too big for her to take in. I settled the girls in a corner of the sitting room, where the sunlight fell across a pile of Legos and stacks of picture books. Mia started building a tiny blue house while talking softly about nothing important, letting her words fill the space without demanding anything in return. Sophia sat beside her at a distance and watched with quiet curiosity, her hands twisting the edge of her shirt the way frightened children often do. I introduced simple activities like drawing shapes on loose paper and reading stories with slow, steady rhythm. Everything was gentle, patient, and open, giving Sophia room to choose how close she wanted to be. She stayed silent, but she did not leave, and that alone felt like a small victory that settled warm in my chest. When Mia pointed at a picture in the book and asked what Sophia thought, there was a long pause that stretched across the room. I assumed we would sit in silence until Mia moved on, but Sophia whispered a single word so soft it barely carried through the air. The sound of her voice was fragile and small, yet it felt powerful enough to still the whole house, and I saw how much it meant when her eyes lifted just enough to meet mine. Lucas watched from the doorway, standing very still with one hand resting on the frame as if he were afraid to break the moment. His face changed in a way I had not seen before, touched by something tender and unfamiliar. He stayed quiet, letting the girls lead the moment, and I realized he was holding back emotion with more effort than he used in any show of authority. As the afternoon stretched on, the room filled with a soft kind of warmth that had nothing to do with the mansion's grandeur, and everything to do with the small steps made by two children finding each other. I sat there listening to their quiet play and felt something shift inside me, something that felt like belonging even though I knew the danger woven through this place. By the time we left that evening, I understood that all 4 of us were circling around the same broken places, trying to build something gentle in a world that was anything but gentle. Over the next weeks, the mansion shifted in a way I did not expect, as if the walls learned to breathe again. Sophia's laughter came in soft bursts that floated down the halls, and even the guards seemed to carry themselves with less stiffness. when she ran past them clutching Legos or picture books. I found myself moving through the rooms with a kind of calm I had not felt in years, and each time Lucas appeared in the doorway to check on us, there was something almost gentle in his eyes. There were moments when I saw him as nothing more than a father trying his best to hold together a life that had been torn apart. He tied Sophia's hair with careful fingers, even though he pretended he did not know how, and I caught him standing in the hall late one evening watching the girls draw with an expression that looked like gratitude he was afraid to speak. Trust came slowly between us, built from small gestures rather than promises, but it settled into my days in a way that made me feel steadier than I meant to be. The change broke one evening when he asked me to speak with him in the study. His voice held a tension he tried to hide, and the room felt colder as he explained a threat from someone who wanted to hurt him and anyone near him. He insisted that he would not risk Sophia or leave Mia and me vulnerable, and he said security protection was no longer optional. Fear rose in me fast and sharp because all I wanted was a quiet life where Mia could grow without shadows following us. Anger followed just as quickly because I had worked so hard to keep my daughter far from violence, and now danger had walked straight into our world. I told him I did not want armed men near my home, and that Mia deserved better than to grow up under the watch of people trained for conflict. But he stepped closer with a steadiness that came from something deeper than pride. He said he understood my fear, and that he would never force me to stay if the situation grew worse. He asked only for time, promising the protection would be discreet and temporary. I agreed because I knew refusing would not make the danger disappear, and because part of me trusted him even when I wished I did not. Later, as I walked Mia home from school, the street looked the same as always, with parents waiting near the gate and kids calling to one another across the sidewalk. But then I noticed a man standing near a stroller, smiling politely at the crowd while his eyes scanned every passing car. The realization settled slowly in my chest. Lucas had already placed protection around us, hidden in plain sight, and the line between safety and danger had grown thinner than ever. Sophia's birthday felt like a small miracle from the moment I stepped into the decorated garden behind the estate. The air smelled like fresh cake and sunlight, and Sophia stood near the table wearing a soft blue dress that she had chosen herself after weeks of gentle progress. Mia ran to her with a handful of ribbons, and their laughter rose together with a warmth that made the entire place feel brighter than it had in years. A few guards stood at a distance, pretending not to watch the way the girls played near the fountain with new toys scattered around them. Lucas stayed close enough to listen, though he tried to hide how deeply he soaked in every small moment of joy. When Sophia leaned into him to show her new book, he rested a hand on her shoulder with quiet pride that softened every hard line in his face. The shift came so fast it felt like the world snapped in two. A sharp crack echoed from the far side of the house, followed by the sound of breaking glass that sent a jolt of fear straight through me. Security shouted from the hallway, and before I could fully process what was happening, the guards rushed the children toward the interior rooms. Sophia froze mid-step, her eyes wide and fixed on the window as if the noise dragged her back to every fear she had tried to forget. I grabbed her hand and felt her trembling so badly she could not take a single step forward. Mia clung to my side, and I knew I had to move for all of us before panic swallowed the moment whole. I crouched to Sophia's level and spoke in the same steady voice I used on the hardest nights, urging her to breathe with me. I counted softly, letting each number pull her away from the fear and back into the present where I needed her to be. When she finally blinked and whispered the next number under her breath, I felt her fingers tighten around mine, and together we moved down the hall while glass shattered behind us. A man appeared at the end of the corridor, moving fast in our direction with eyes fixed on the children. My body reacted before thought, pulling both girls behind me as I braced for something I was not prepared to face. Then Lucas came through the side doorway with a force that filled the hall, bringing the man down before his hand even lifted, and the sound of the struggle echoed through the walls like a storm breaking open. When the danger finally passed, we gathered in the kitchen where the lights flickered softly above us. Lucas checked the girls first, touching Sophia's cheek with a gentleness that made her lean into him, then turning to Mia with the same protective care. When he looked at me, his voice held an emotion I had never heard from him, as he said I had protected what mattered most to him. In that moment, I understood that the choice I made today had tied me to this family in a way I could no longer deny. The days after the attack moved slowly as the house settled back into a fragile calm that felt earned rather than assumed. Sophia clung to Lucas with a quiet need that he met without hesitation, and I watched him sit with her in the early mornings when she woke from dreams she could not shake. The guards returned to their usual posts, but their presence felt different now, shaped by the memory of how close everything had come to breaking. I found Lucas in the study one afternoon, sitting at the edge of his desk with a look that carried a weight I had not seen before. He told me the threat had passed for now, But he also knew peace in his world never lasted forever, and he wanted to give me the chance to walk away before danger circled back. He offered enough money for me to start fresh in a quiet town far from Chicago, promising he would make sure no one ever came after me or Mia again if that was the path I chose. I stood there caught between two futures, each carrying its own kind of fear and hope. Leaving meant clean air, simple days, and a life where Mia could grow without sirens or shadows. Yet the thought of leaving Sophia made something inside me ache in a way I could not easily name. Staying meant uncertainty, but it also meant connection, healing, and the steady truth that I had become part of something real inside these walls. I told him I did not save a mafia boss that night. I saved a father who was trying to protect what little he had left in the world. His expression softened with a quiet relief that slipped past the careful discipline he usually wore, and in that moment I knew he already understood my answer. Later that afternoon I found the children in the garden room surrounded by soft light and tall green leaves brushing the windows. Mia showed Sophia how to braid string into little patterns, and Sophia laughed in a way that made the whole room feel warmer. Lucas stood nearby watching them. His posture relaxed for the first time in weeks, and something gentle passed between us in the silence. I realized then that strength was not always about fighting or running. Sometimes it meant choosing the place where your heart felt steady even when the world outside was unpredictable. I stayed because love can grow in broken places if someone is brave enough to believe in it. If you are listening to this and carrying your own kind of fear, I hope you ask yourself whether you are surviving or truly living, because sometimes the choice between them is the moment everything finally begins to change.